What's up, guys? We are in chapter 6 of my book, The One Thing You Need to Know About God. This chapter is entitled God's Way of Doing Things. So, again, this part 2 of this book is, like I said, kind of the meat and potatoes of the book, and we're getting into God's character. And this is kind of where I talk about how Jesus is God's interpreter, God's action towards us. There's a saying that we have that goes, actions speak louder than words. And so, you can see it like Jesus is God's action towards us. I've also heard it said that I mentioned a preacher that I listened to, Bertie Britz, says that Jesus is God's body language. So, it's like he gave the example of if he came home and he saw his wife like vacuuming and having some violent kind of body language, and he asked her how she was, and she said she's fine, or she said she's okay, but he could tell like something was wrong from her body language. That obviously the body language can speak a lot. And so in terms of our relationship with God and how that relates to Jesus, we can hear a lot of things about God and a lot about Jesus, but if it doesn't, a lot of things about God, but if what we hear about God doesn't line up with Jesus, then, we're at least not hearing the whole story, and at worst, hearing the wrong story. So we definitely need to make sure that we're running it through that filter and lining it up with what we see God telling us in Jesus, okay? So, God is very misunderstood, and that's one of the things that I tried to give you some of the misconceptions that I went through in my personal experience in getting to know God. But again, you just want to stay focused on what God is telling us through Jesus. Many times we get in the habit of measuring how much God loves us or God's love for us based on what's going on in the world. And that's one of the major things that we need to learn how to get over, and kind of part of being a mature Christian is just understanding that what goes on in the world is not an indication of God's love for us. God's love for us is based on one thing, and that's Jesus, okay? So I gave some examples of how we can start seeing Jesus a little bit more. I gave some types and shadows. Obviously, we have the Gospels where you can get insight into Jesus and God's character. For me, when I started learning about types and shadows in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that was really cool. There was some really good revelation that I got about God's character, and one of my favorite ones that I talk about in the book is Joshua 20. So, quickly, the story behind that is that so back in those days, they kind of had a rule or a kind of understanding that if somebody got killed, the other, the family member of that person could come in and kill that person. I don't know all the details about it, but that's the basic gist of it. And so if somebody did something on accident, they needed a place where they could go for refuge while they kind of had this trial set up. Or else, the family member of the person that got killed would just come and kill them. So it's really interesting when you break down Joshua 20. There's 6 different cities of refuge, and back in those days, names of people and cities meant a whole lot more than they do now. A lot of times people just name their kids stuff that they think is cool. And whatever, that's fine, but I'm just saying, like, back in those times, the names of people and cities meant a lot. There was a lot behind those things. So I just come across teaching on this. Actually, I forget where I got it from, to be honest with you, but I just started doing some research on those cities and the names behind them. And you can, like I said, you can glean a lot about God's character from those. One of them I know off the top of my head is like shoulder bearer, or someone who bears the burden for you. So that's just one example, but like I said, I go into the names of all those in the book, and it can really help you just, again, see God's character through Jesus more, and just get to know Jesus and kind of God's way of doing things, okay, and how he relates to us, okay? So that's basically it for this chapter. As far as my little short message here goes, obviously you guys can read the study questions and talk more, ask more questions if you want, but hopefully you get some out of this, and let me know if you have any questions or anything else you want to talk about. All right, thanks for stopping by. Peace.